Hacohen, truth surveyor. Deep in the shadows, the stories unwind. Cults and conspiracies left behind. With the mic in hand and questions bold, secrets and scandals start to unfold. Freedom of thought, he's shining the light, exposing the dark, making wrongs right.
That was an incredible intro. I love it.
I'm glad you like it.
Man.
Yeah, we have AI do that every show now, and I'm loving the responses we're getting. So thank you, Josh, for going the extra mile to do it.
I also liked it. You used all the photos that you used. They're good photos, but like most of them are from like 5 years ago when I had hair. And as you can see, I'm very bald now. So
we got two versus one here.
Yeah.
That's you know what we use whatever we can get. We scrape it. We try to like. I want people to. The point of the show is to get to know people, and then we learn on the side. I care about who you are as a person, and I want to introduce you to everybody. Gavriel Hacohen is our guest tonight. He's a cult expert, and he has a podcast, Leaving Eden. I don't know if you have the link. We can put it up. If not, we'll get it up. It'll be in down below later as well. Tell us about the Leaving Eden podcast. What do you do there?
So, it's a show that I co-host with my friend Sadie Carpenter. Sadie was raised as a member of the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church. It's a very extreme sect of Christianity. Like, are you familiar with the Duggars? Are you familiar with 19, 18, 17, however many kids and counting?
After 2, I stopped. You know,
well,
3 is
too
many.
Stop.
I'm the youngest of 5. Like once you like cross that line, you're just insane.
Well, that's a lot of kids, but you know, in that world, you would be having church members say, "Oh, so when's the next one on the way?" So that's the world that she grew up in. Is like maybe half a step less insane than the world of the Duggars and that kind of world. She only had 2 siblings, but she was raised in such a very extreme patriarchal form of Christianity. You know, she was raised in a community where women weren't allowed to wear pants because that was seen as a man's garment. So if you're a woman, you have to wear a skirt that goes like all the way past your knees.
Yeah, my sister went to a church where the pastor tried instituting that. My sister, for a short while, refused to wear pants.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She that was like one of the final straws, though. I think she shortly after that married a military guy and moved away from the state to get away from them all. I think so.
Yeah, people will do that. So she was raised in that. You know, it's a very repressive environment, especially if you're a young woman. And, you know, she grew up in that environment and that's all that she ever knew. When she was about 20, she was attending Bible college and she'd been having some questions about the validity of all of the doctrines, everything that she'd been learning in her church. Namely, one of the things that she was taught was that, excuse me. Sorry, I just ate. One of the things that she was taught was that if you're gay or if you're bisexual, then either that's like a demonic attachment or something had to happen to you to make you that way. And she sort of started realizing that she was bisexual and understanding, oh, well, nothing happened to me that would have made me that way.
Therefore.
And you know, nothing like I can't have a demonic attachment because, you know, I was raised in this church environment. I followed all the rules. I did everything right. And that sort of started causing some questions for her. She was also having questions with regards to like their salvation theology, in that she had issues with the idea that, you know, people who had never even heard of Jesus would be doomed to hell because they'd never heard of Jesus, and how that was just not fair. But she was being taught basically that you have to do that in order to try to influence them to want to go to be missionaries, to go to places where they might not have heard of Jesus, as very much as like a control tactic. So she was having questions about this, and she was about 20 years old at Bible college. And the guy who was the basically in charge of the whole denomination, was found to be sexually abusing a 16-year-old. And that really caused everything that she'd been feeling to snowball. And so she got out. And that must have been back in, like, I want to say 2012, 2013. I met her in 2018 or 2019 when we were working together. We, just had a job. She was my coworker. And we were both interested in religion. We were both interested in these sorts of things because, she was raised how she was raised. I was raised Jewish, but in Portland, Oregon, where people aren't that religious. And so I had a much more secular upbringing that she did. And so we both would have conversations about this from different angles. And when the pandemic hit, we decided that we would start a podcast together and we would talk about this stuff. And we've been doing it for about 5 years now. And
it's great to see the things that were created during COVID and that are still going on. And we're kind of one of those stories as well.
Yeah. Well, it's fantastic. I know so many people that really either they got a hobby or they got a new job or they got really into something during
skill.
that. Yeah, a new skill. And now it's like their favorite thing. And it's fantastic. Doing a podcast is like my main job now.
Oh, what? Really?
It's fantastic. Awesome. Yeah. There's so many people who have stories that are so similar to what she went through. And so we use this and her really culty upbringing to talk about what she went through. And we talk about religion. We talk about the branch of fundamentalism that she dealt with. We also talk about, just like religion and theology. We also talk about other cults. Like we have episodes where we talk about, Jonestown, and we have episodes where we talk about the Branch Davidians. We did one recently where we talked about, do you know who Tony Alamo is?
That sounds real familiar.
Back in the 1980s, he made these jackets, the Tony Alamo jackets. They were a big fashion statement, and they would have like palm trees on them, and they would say like California. Yes. Or Michael Jackson wore one on the cover of Bad. That was a Tony Alamo jacket. But Tony Alamo was running a cult, and he had those jackets made with child labor from cult members. So we did one about
a greater way to save money than just somewhere in an island nation.
Well, apparently the kids were the best at it because their fingers were so small, because they could really rhinestone the jackets up if you needed them to, and do all the sequins and the beads and stuff. So we've been doing this show for about 5 years now, nearly 5 years. And over that time, I have gone from somebody who, like at the start of the show, I started out where I was trying to just ask dumb questions. You know what I'm saying? Like if you don't know about something,
I do it on this show too. Like
you have to ask the basic questions and things like that.
Sure.
And now, for 5 years, we've been doing this, and now like I've actually been in documentaries and as like a cult expert in documentaries now. And so
you do it long enough. That's whatever the rule is, however many hours you put into something.
Yeah.
And if you're serious about it and you care about it, I think that's the big thing. Whenever I'm comfortable calling somebody an expert, is that they put the time in. Do they care about the subject? Is it just like, I'm going to write another book on this new programming language, or I'm going to write another book on this particular tree, whatever it might be. Like, but are you really the expert, or are you just trying to sell a book? I like the people that I lived in it for this, and I plan on it for a long time. So yeah, I get that. We have a ghost hunter expert who I love the guy because it's his. He has an IT job like me, but it's his thing. He breathes it. He lives it. He's been on TV shows talking about it. He talks to people every moment he has, I think, that he gets to. It's a passion, and I get that from you.
Yeah. I mean, it's so fascinating because the more you learn about this topic, the more you see aspects of coercive control everywhere in the world. And excuse me, I just ate dinner a few minutes ago. But you see aspects of the coercive control that is present in cults and cult groups in a lot of places where you wouldn't think that it would show up.
Yeah, I I was in advertising a long time ago, advertising marketing, and I keep reminding people that the number one job of advertising is to change your mind. That's the only reason advertising exists. You might not want a Big Mac right now, but I'm going to teach you to have a Big Mac. Here's a picture of one, and you know that smell. And I'm going to use this soft voice to try to get it. It's advertising is part of they go hand in hand for me. And then it gets scary when I think that everything that we see throughout every day of our lives, on every screen, on every printed media, is in part brought to you by advertising, if not completely. Like the ads that show up on your screen, the way that they advertise to get it into your hand. Advertising, whose job is to change your mind, is in your face almost every waking minute.
I mean, ads pay for part of my rent, so
yeah,
like,
and I'm part of the problem too. But yeah, I think there's that the way that cults work and the way that human brain works and the psychology behind it all. There's so much overlap. I don't think advertising is a cult necessarily, but I could see like the way that it's used. The way the psychology
messaging and the propaganda and the techniques are there.
Yeah. And how do you change a mind?
Yeah.
Especially if it doesn't want to. I think it's easier sometimes. Well, you anger them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of the things I actually have on something I want to talk to you about. How do cults generally get started? Like what's the seed? It's usually one person, I assume, but what's something that maybe we should identify what a cult is first.
Okay. So a cult is a coercive group. It is a group that uses coercive control to control a person or a bunch of people. Actually, you know what I can do? I'll share this link in the chat right now. How we in this field discuss cults is and identify them is use the BITE model. The BITE model was developed by Stephen Hassan, who is one of the leading cult experts in the world. He joined the Moonies in the 1970s, also known as the Unification Church. They were the Church of Sun Young Moon. Yeah, it's kind of a mouthful. He then
Thank you, Josh.
he was in the Moonies, and he got out and then decided to devote the rest of his life into identifying cults, identifying this coercive control, and really like listing it out in a way that would make it identifiable to other people so that they could label these groups as cults and as groups of authoritarian control. And so he defines authoritarian control in 4 different ways. And so there's 4 different basic techniques. There's behavior control, there's information control, there's thought control, and there's emotion control. And those are basically the 4 ways in which cults or coercive or cult groups have power over individuals. So behavior control could be something as like it's defined as regulating a person's physical reality. So that could be anything from telling you how to eat, how to dress, what hairstyles are appropriate, to who you're allowed to have sex with and who you're not allowed to have sex with. Or it could be like kidnapping and torture and beating, or it could be imprisonment and not letting you leave. It's
every type of control,
right? And so just because something does like tells you, oh, you have to dress this way, you have to eat this way if you're a member of this group, that doesn't make it a cult. It has to have all 4 of the aspects in order for it to really be a cult.
Otherwise, a private school would be a cult. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not saying that there's no private schools or there's no like groups within schools, like like certain fraternities, I think definitely exhibit cult-like behavior. Especially the ones that are where there's huge problems with sexual violence at a lot of these, Greek organizations on college campuses, that those could definitely be qualified as cults, in my opinion. So information control is where things get interesting here, because it's not just like information control like you think of as with cult propaganda and cult brainwashing. Because you can have a closed information environment where the only pieces of information that you're allowed to consume are information that is pre-approved, and that strengthens the regime that is essentially state media.
Right.
There can also be the aspect of using a culture of informing on other people, a culture of snitching on other people in order to create a mistrust within other members so that people don't know that who they can go to talk about problems that they're having because it might get them in trouble.
A
So
nice healthy dose of paranoia.
yeah, so the paranoia also helps keep people in control. The thought control goes beyond information control. So the thought control is telling you it's trying to make it so that the way that you perceive reality is through the lens that the group wants you to perceive reality. So you have to accept their version of reality as reality. So that might be accepting that. I'm trying to think of an example. Like if you were in an extreme fundamentalist cult, a religious cult, then you might be encouraged to think of everything in your life and go through everything in your life as a fight between God and the devil. So
Okay.
you
Yeah.
look
Yeah.
at, yeah. So if you
Yeah.
look at something and you think about something, you think, is this from God or is this from the devil? And it encourages you to think about things as either all black or all white. So either all good or all bad. There's also a lot of thought stopping cliches. So you might be taught a turn of phrase where if you think something wrong, then you think this turn of phrase and it makes you, I mean, it's a thought stopping cliche. So I think a good example of this would be like, just to use a Bible verse, like the heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. So if you were in a really culty church, they would tell you the heart is deceitful and desperately wicked if you really want something that is not something that the church wants for you. So
Okay.
you would think, so it's like, oh, I want this, I don't know. I'm trying to think of something that would be against the church. Oh, I want to watch this movie, and the church tells me that I shouldn't be watching this movie. Well, the heart is deceitful and desperately wicked, and that's just the devil trying to get me, to try to get me to watch this movie, and that's how the devil's going to get me. And so it makes you doubt yourself and doubt your own thoughts and doubt your own ability to comprehend what's happening to you.
And more than likely pick what they wanted you to pick in the first place rather than have a decision.
Exactly. And then emotion control is doing similar things to that, except with emotions. So there's good emotions and there's bad emotions. So they might say you're not allowed to feel anger when XYZ thing happens to you, because, or like, yeah, like you're not allowed to feel anger when something bad happens to you in the church because that's God's will. But if you see something outside the church that you think is that stokes your righteous anger, if you see the world being not the way that the church says that it should be, then that righteous anger is okay, and in fact it's encouraged. Or they might encourage you to only feel joy, and if you feel bad emotions, then that's you not being properly not properly grateful for the things that you have in your life. If you are ever unhappy about that, they might use, guilt, shame, fear to get you to do the things that they want and teach you that you should be feeling guilty all the time because you're worthless. And only by our group do you have any amount of value. You can go to Dr. Hassan's website, freedomofmind.com, where he has all of this stuff laid out. But I think the big distinction here is that the first two aspects, the behavior control and the information control, are a thing that the group can enforce on you. But the thought control and the emotion control are something that you have to enforce on yourself. That's where self-brainwashing happens rather than just being brainwashing that somebody else is doing to you. So In order for something to be a cult, it has to have all four of those things.
All four.
Yeah.
I don't want to. I was going to say, can you think of any examples of somebody that would have four that isn't? But yeah, let's. What I really know is I'm fascinated by the idea of how a cult kind of starts. Obviously, my thought is a person wanted to do it, but how do they grow from small numbers of? Because I think one of the things that I sense in most of those things were that you need a group of people to help monitor a new person. You need a group of people to reinforce things. You need different people to kind of surround them, so to speak. So how do they go from that one guy? He finds two or three, I guess, people that are interested in this. How do they grow it? What's that model? Is there been studies on that? Like, what's that spark?
You would be shocked to learn that a lot of people who end up being cult leaders are just low rent scammers who things got out of hand.
Really? Like a bad sitcom plot. Like, I don't know, these people started giving me money and then they brought some friends.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. I was telling you
I wanted to do this as a kid.
I was telling you about Tony Alamo.
Nice bring back.
Yeah, I was telling you about Tony Alamo, and his wife was a woman named Susan Alamo, and they started their church together. They started their ministry together. What Susan Alamo was doing before she met Tony was she was in California, and when she and her daughter needed food or they needed money or something, they would do a church. So what they would do is they would put on dirty clothes and go to a church and sit in the back and then have a planned divine revelation and then say, we need money so that we can go minister to people in XYZ place. And the people in the church would give them money. And they were running this scam at tons of churches in Southern California. And then she met Tony, who also figured out that if you were running scams like this, then you could scam church people because they were generous and they would be willing to help you if they thought that you were really going to go out and do good in the world. And they met each other and decided that they were going to sort of start their own ministry together. And it got so big and so crazy that they ended up having like mansions and they had compounds. Like, you can go, if you go and look it up right now, look up the mansion that was the Tony and Susan Alamo mansion in Arkansas, and the mausoleum that Susan Alamo's body was in for the amount of time before the body got stolen. That's a whole other story. It's crazy. You would be shocked at how many of these people just started out as like low rent scammers and things got out of hand.
I mean, that was a good scam that she had, because
the
way that churches work, you're generally in one church every week. You're not visiting other churches. So she could do the same exact thing at a church next door. And maybe if somebody talked about it at like a community picnic, they would say, oh, we had that same woman. And then they might figure it out. But like, spreading it out even a little bit would probably save your, wow.
And this was back in like the 1960s, and this was before the internet, so people could like post about it on the heart-shaped pool. Yeah, this was a cult headquarters. This here, they got rich. They got real rich off this. But what they would do when they were trying to get members is they would go on the streets of Hollywood and they would find homeless people, and they would say, "We will give you a meal and a place to stay. Come with us on our bus to our church out here in the valley." And they get the homeless people to come out with them and they feed them. And then they would put the people to work and they would send them to jobs and basically say, "We'll give you a place to stay, but you have to give us all of the money from your job."
Oh, right.
And, or, you'll work here and we'll get you off drugs, but all of your money, you have to donate it back to the church. And in return for that, you eat and you have a place to sleep and you can be part of our ministry. And they did that. And they got a lot of people doing that. And then you basically just have free labor. And they were using the free labor and the free labor of the children of these people to make these jackets that were wildly popular, but they were made using child labor. Of course,
there was like they went with jackets.
Yeah.
Not artwork, not like let's do jackets.
They had a lot of businesses. They had I believe a mattress wholesaling company. Just
all right, you've convinced me. I'm buying some books on this. This is incredible stuff.
Tony and Susan Alamo, look it up. They had I believe that one time Tony Alamo had did he have a restaurant? I can't remember.
It sounds like something here on Dave Letterman. Our guest at the Dave Letterman show eat at Tony Alamo's fine dining restaurant. Like it sounds like a restaurant.
Well, they had a big like televangelism ministry. They had a TV show. You can go up on YouTube and look up videos of Tony and Susan Alamo or Tony Alamo singing, because before he was a Christian scammer, he wanted to be a musician. And he was trying to be a musician.
Is that a common thread?
I mean, David Koresh was also a musician.
Jim Jones, I thought, was interested in music, and then obviously
and killing people. Yeah, Charles Manson.
He's recorded with famous people.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, man.
I mean, but look at him.
Like he's straight off a hee-haw too.
This is like so 70s. This is so like Rhinestone Cowboy.
Peak.
But like, look at him. He looks like Glenn Campbell, or he looks like
Glenn Campbell if he couldn't poop for a week. Is he dead? I don't want to get sued by that.
Yeah, Glenn Campbell, I think, died a couple years ago.
No, this guy.
Campbell, yeah, he's dead. He went to jail forever for being a pedophile.
Oh, good. Fuck him.
There's unfortunately, one of the things about a lot of these cults is that there is a lot of child sexual abuse that goes on.
It just
yeah.
Like yeah, I don't like I never understood anybody who goes, it's a topic for another show, who goes in that direction knowing how they're going to get caught. You know, if you're into that thing, you're going to get caught. The
reality is that a lot of people don't.
I get that some don't, but I'm just hopeful that someday they will, like everybody else. Like I'm hoping, like it's something in me just wants to see them all burn.
With Christian fundamentalism, and this was a big scandal with the thing that the Catholic Church went through, where they had these priests that were abusers that kept, when they would get in trouble for it, they would just ship them from church to church to church. In the American Protestant fundamentalist denominations, that's also a huge problem. That there are pastors who are known to be abusers of like young women in the youth group. And a huge part of it is like the purity culture for that, for that community, is that what they do is they teach women that men are basically just like animals, that we can't control ourselves, that we're in, if I see like a collarbone or an ankle or something, and I'm left alone with you, it's not my fault what I do to you, because I was just driven so crazy. And that's what they teach them. And so,
have you ever heard the answer to the man bear question? I think a lot of people believe that.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of men that are raised this way, and they're told like, oh, well, that's just the way. Yeah. It's not your fault. That's just the way that you are. And then when you have a church that's based around that, that's sort of built around that,
perpetuates
then when you have the youth pastor is, he's like 27 or 28 or something, and he gets caught abusing a 15, 16-year-old young woman, then they're going to say, well, what was she wearing? Was she left alone with him in a situation? It's clearly her fault. And a lot of times, and I know plenty of people who have been through this, where they were basically brought up in front of the church when they were 15 or 16 years old and made to apologize to their married
Oh, I have heard of that.
pastor or
Yeah.
youth pastor who abused them for tempting him and causing him to stumble. Like, that's a very
And
real thing that's happened to people that I know
a
personally.
lot.
It's awful.
It's
But
disgusting.
these very, like, the very extreme religious groups, a lot of them will have a culture that's based around that, and that's a huge problem as well. So a lot of people that do that sort of thing don't get caught, sadly. Like,
Gavi, I gotta ask you at this point. We're
Yeah.
getting it's dark, and you're right. And I need to know: are there any good cults? Like, are there any that do good? Like, they fit all four. They might even admit their cult, but are there like some that just do good with what they have?
well, in order for something to be a cult, it has to be coercive, and so I would say no.
That's never good. Okay.
That's so it's the coercion that's the bad thing. It's like you can be in a situation where you can consent to somebody manipulating your thoughts and manipulating your emotions, and I would say
I deal with that with the relationship stuff side of things. Like, some people want that.
yeah, some people want that, or even if you were talking about like psychotherapy, where you go into a room with somebody and part of the agreement is you're going to teach me how to think about these things differently and how to process my emotions differently than I'm doing right now, because what I'm doing right now doesn't work. But the difference between that and like a group that's doing that to you is that you are agreeing this is what I want to have happen. So
Okay.
and a lot of
Yeah, it's
people
still-
go
yeah.
through that voluntarily, and it can be helpful for them. But that's not a cult, because the real element there is consent and saying, yes, I want this. I recognize that I have a problem in my life that I could be doing better with, so I'm trying to get help with that, rather than
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times when cults are really recruiting people, who they will go after is they will go after for people who are otherwise vulnerable. So, like, say you were going through like a bad breakup or the death of a loved one, and you're like, what happened? What went wrong? Looking for a reason why that went wrong and why that happened is something that we do because as like a defense mechanism, so we can we're human, we want to make sure it doesn't happen again, and so we want to look for a reason why. And so a group that is very culty might look at somebody who feels like their life is not going right and wants to find a reason why, and they will say, here's the reason why.
Here's the reason why.
And if you follow our roadmap of doing XYZ thing, it will be difficult to do all of these things. And you have to be really like militant about it. And you have to be very like strict with yourself about it and live by these rules.
Right.
But you will, if you do XYZ thing, then you will get this result. And that's how a lot of them recruit people.
Yeah, the recruitment part is interesting in that I grew up studying comparative religions as a hobby. Joseph Campbell books, the whole thing. I was one of those kids. And after my father died, a certain members of a larger religion, well known by name to everybody around here, they started showing up about 3 months after my father died every weekend and just handing a pamphlet and talking to my mom. And I'm pretty sure that they just had the obituaries and they'd write down a name of a widower and then go visit her in 3 months when she's like at the peak of trying to rebuild and figure things out. And they came around for about a year and a half, fairly regularly, not every week, but yeah. And to me, it just smelled like recruitment. They had been looking at obituaries, and this was a planned thing.
That feels really predatory to me.
Yeah, it could have been coincidence. They just started showing up, but like never saw them before that. You know.
Well, with the Christian fundamentalist groups like the ones that Sadie was raised in, a lot of the people that join them are people who say, like, you grew up and you had a very unstable home life. Say you grew up and you had parents who were either not around, or they were on drugs, or they just, they just didn't do a good job of taking care of you. You still love them, but they didn't do a good job of taking care of you. And now you're in your 20s and you're thinking, how do I do things better because I want kids, I want to do things
For
better.
me and my future and my kids. Yeah. How do I not repeat?
Very natural thing, very reasonable thing. There's plenty of people that have advice for you, but if you've never seen that behavior modeled, then where do you go? Well, there's plenty of really extreme fundamentalist groups that will say, if you do XYZ thing, if you homeschool your kids and you do it this way and you put all of the effort into making everything perfect, then your kids' lives will be perfect. And they will get the upbringing that you never had, and they will have the stability, they will have the the white picket fence, and they'll have this and that and the other thing. But it requires you to submit to your husband in XYZ way, to never question the authority of God or the church, and never question the authority of your husband over you. And if you model that behavior, then your children will have the perfect upbringing, and it will be difficult, but your children will have the perfect lives growing up. And then when they grow up, they'll, because you did the right thing, and this is what God wants for you. And there are plenty of groups that will tell you that. And
they got you and your kids eventually.
Yeah. And well, your kids are going to be grown up with that. Yeah. And a lot of them are going to say, this was crazy. This was really traumatic for us. And they end up deconstructing. And then that relationship that you have with them might break down, because you might feel that, oh, they're ungrateful for everything that you sacrificed. Yeah. Or you might get it into your head, oh, my kids are going to have the afterlife outcome that I don't want them to have. Or it might be that you're part of a church where they're saying, if somebody isn't part of our church, then you need to be separated from them, because they would be a bad influence on you. It's the first rule of triage: save yourself first. So then you might end up with a situation where you're low contact or no contact with your own children, despite the fact that you did try to do everything right. And that's a situation that I've heard time and time and time again from people who are raised in really extreme fundamentalist or very extreme religious groups. And it's so sad.
Yeah, I had a gentleman over my house. He came with a friend, and the reason he started showing up suddenly with the friend is he had nobody left in his life, because he was part of a church that he decided to leave. Yeah. And they cut him off. Everybody, his family, his friends.
It's awful.
It's
really
everybody.
Awful.
And he was still glad to be out of the church, but he did miss his friends. And he was hurt. He never thought that they would be the people that cut him off, because he never did it to others, like, sort of thing.
It's the hardest thing to go through for so many people. I know so many people who, like, either they were raised in this group and they did everything right, and then they realized, oh, I'm gay, and they went and they talked to their pastor and they confessed to and I'm using the biggest air quotes ever for people. You do video, but do you guys do audio too?
We just mostly video right now.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if you're listening to this, I'm doing the biggest air quotes ever. The sin of same-sex attraction is what it is called, or they'll abbreviate it to SSA because they don't want to say it, because it's like such a boogeyman. But they would go and they would confess that sin and basically just get ostracized from the community that they grew up in. And it's horrible. It's a horrible way to, it's the guilt and the shame and the fear that you feel like you're doing something wrong. Or it would be somebody who would be in a relationship where they were being treated quite horribly, or they were being abused by a partner. They would be in a domestic abuse situation, and they would make the, very courageous decision to get divorced and to, take the kids and go. And their church community would ostracize them because they don't believe in divorce. And they believe that you just have to stick it out and go to counseling and just do whatever you have to do.
Try
even
harder
if the person
to make him happier.
To make him happier, to not make him mad, even though, if he's going to abuse you, he's going to abuse you.
God has all the answers.
I know, and you just have to like tough it out because that's what he wants from you. Like I know women who were who you know they were praying for a Christian husband, but they were praying for a Christian husband who wouldn't hit them because they were told in church your husband might hit you and you just have to deal with it. That's like, I mean, it's such a horrible, like, very extreme religions like that. They can be so horrible and they can just treat people so badly. I mean, men can have it bad as well. Men can have these expectations that are put on them that they have to support a family and they have to keep having children that they really can't afford. And it's their job to be the only one who's working. Because their wife can't work because it's a sin
Work
for
hard
women
and
to work
provide.
outside. Yeah. So it's a sin for women to work outside of the home. And so you end up with men who are, they're working 3 jobs, they sleep 3 hours a night, and their lives are just awful. And they are just tired all the time and they're like,
They can't even enjoy the kids they have. They can't enjoy the
yeah,
wife. They can't, like, their life, their quality of life is gone in order to perpetuate a happy life that they're not having.
yes. Yes, but this is what God wants for you because your children are like arrows, and happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them, I believe is the Bible verse that they base that teaching on, that you should just have as many kids as possible. Some churches are like that. That's what if you're familiar with the IBLP, the Quiverful movement, the Duggars,
Yeah,
19
not
kids and
familiar
counting,
on
that's
that
what they're
level,
about.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Hey,
that's what they're about.
about 30 years ago, there was a cult that was making the news, the Garbage Eaters.
I
You know of
haven't heard
them?
of these ones. No.
So
Garbage eaters.
the thing was that they were people that they were isolationist in that if as soon as you joined them, you had to leave your family and everybody around you, and you traveled around and you basically ate out of the garbage. You were reclaiming things that other people were throwing away. That was part of what God wanted. And they were mysterious in that they didn't have a central meeting place, but they somehow all had the same literature. They would, like, there was handouts, and I just wondered if they were still around because I wondered how you could do it without a centralized meeting place. And they were, I know that they were national. Like they say, we found these guys in New York and these guys in Cleveland, these guys in LA. This is a garbage eater sign written on this. I just remember a while ago, and I wondered if they were still around.
I've never heard of these. That is, I'll have to look that up.
It's probably, they probably have a different name. They're like, no, we're the so-and-sos. Like, what are you calling us, the garbage? That's cool.
Garbage
That's not
eaters.
cool.
Wow. I thought you were like 30 years ago. I thought you were going to ask about the Rajneeshis.
I
Out in
know that
Oregon.
name too. I knew the
Yeah.
moon story a little bit.
Yeah.
Hmm.
No, the Rajneeshis were out in Oregon, and I remember because I grew up in Oregon. I grew up in Portland, and
Is that town that's still around that people say is like super chill and like everybody that's still there is friendly?
yeah,
I saw
and they were all
YouTuber.
dressed in red. But back when the Rajneeshis were, when my parents first, I believe this was in like the 80s, but my parents first moved to the Portland area in like the late 80s, early 90s. And the thing about the Rajneeshis was that they were this cult that was based in Oregon, and they would get homeless people off the street and bring them out to their compound. And you had to dye all your clothes red. And so when my parents first moved to Portland, the neighbors were like, don't wear red or people will think you might be a Rajneeshi. Even though this was like a couple years after that whole thing kind of stopped being a thing.
And then the Crips moved into town and all hell broke loose. Sorry.
Yeah.
We can make that in a nice animated short.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Rajneeshis
got the
versus the
Rajneeshis.
Crips.
Garbage eaters. Hey,
What do we got? Tell me
Jim
about
Roberts, culture eaters cult. Jim Roberts, really.
this.
The
I've
Brethren.
heard
The
of people who are
Brethren?
I know people who get really into like the subculture of, I mean, I'm from Oregon. I know a lot of hippies. I know people who are very much into the like leave nothing behind, like the leave no trace, almost like nothing from the earth or everything back to the earth kind of people.
Yeah.
And so that
I,
I know people who are kind of into that subculture and who are like who kind of take
oh,
it kind of far, but that is different.
you
That is
can't shun
different.
laughter and play. I'm not down with it. You can eat all the garbage you want. I appreciate you saving it from the landfill, but sorry,
You're
Jim,
gonna do
you
both
screwed
of
up
those
there.
things? Yeah, that's rough.
You got to do sustainability, man.
Eat
It's
garbage and be miserable.
yeah.
My family lives in a pile of garbage. Sorry, it's a Whitest Kid You Know skit. That one of my favorites.
I mean,
The
did you watch Trailer Park Boys?
I watched the first 8 seasons. I saw them live twice, and then after a certain point, I just had too much. I'm
I was
happy
just
they're still
thinking
going.
about. I was thinking about when Ricky's dad was living in the dump.
Oh, it's the way it goes, boys. It's the way it
Yeah,
goes.
way of the road.
Way of the road.
That's the way she
The
goes.
piss jugs.
Yeah. I love the Trailer Park Boys. I think it's so funny. Rest in peace to John Dudsworth, Jim Leahy.
He was such an amazing actor, and when you find out, like, you know he's an actor, and all that stuff was done sober, but then you see like watch some of his dramatic stuff sometime if you can find some clips of it. The dude was an amazing actor, and the stuff that he brought to there, that he improv'd as well. Good job, Dunsworth. Like, I think I stopped watching when he was gone, because like he was a good percentage of why I liked the show.
I can't imagine watching that show without him. I just think it would have been different.
And Bubbles was supposed to be a throwaway character just for one episode, and Mike Smith was actually making fun of a childhood friend, and they're like, let's put him in. And
yeah,
without him,
Ricky
again, no show. Like that show hit so much good luck.
I remember the first one. I'm a huge Rush fan. Rush is like
of course
one of
you've
my
seen all the Alex stuff. So
yeah. So I got into this show because I was really a fan of Rush, and I heard, there's an episode of the show Trailer Park Boys where they go to a Rush concert and they kidnap Alex, and I thought that was funny, and so I watched that episode. I said, this show is kind of funny, and then I watched it, and I thought it was really good.
yeah, and he loved the show. That's why he agreed to do it. He's like, and he got involved in the. I think he is producer on one of the movies too, right?
I don't know, but that's fantastic.
I think he was. He was a fan of the show. That's how it all worked out. And like Mike Smith, I think Mike Smith played Bubbles. He was a huge fan of Rush. So like it was an actual love of Rush that you mentioned in an early episode, and that's why it came back.
Actually, Sadie and I first really became friends. Like we first became close friends because I had she got out of this cult, and she was part of the nature of that cult was that you're not allowed to listen to music that has drum beats on the 2 and the 4.
Rush is out.
Yeah. So she, like, when she was growing up, literally, like, if music was rock and roll or if it was hip hop or if it was pop, you're supposed to just like sneer at it and turn up your nose at it and make fun of it. And that's also part of the information control and the thought control, and that they teach you reactions that you're supposed to have to something. That you see something that is not meeting your standards, you need to have XYZ reaction to it. So that's part of the cult brainwashing. So anything that would have been like rock and roll or pop music or hip hop music, she was taught that basically the music that has drum beats on the 2 and the 4, those are,
if it's played on the radio today.
Yeah. But like if it's
Listen to
got the like, and if you don't know music and you're listening to this, most songs that are in 4/4 time signature have the drum beat on the 2 and the 4. So it'll be
I'm sure your intro song
but like that is drum beats on the 2 and the 4. That's like every song. She was taught that drum beat came from Africa, and that was the drum beat that in Africa they used to summon demons, and so that's why it got used in rock and roll, is because rock and roll is the devil's music. So
I like how they worked in blaming black people too. Like,
you got to have the racism in there too. Of course, they wouldn't say that it's racism. They're just like, that's just the way that it is. But so she got out of this cult in like, she started exploring different kinds of music, and one of the artists that she got into was Rush, partially because one of the things that really got that she kept with her sort of mentally when she got out of this group was that the most important thing about music was the lyrics, and the lyrics to Rush songs were always deep about like larger topics about there was always like
Trees.
a larger concept that they were
Right.
talking about, either like, you know, Greek mythology or like some political concept or some social concept.
There's,
It
yeah,
wasn't just like baby, baby, you're so fine. It wasn't just that.
everything Neil wrote, especially,
Yeah.
you know, in the later albums, everything he wrote had way more meaning than what you were hearing.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I was a fan of Rush because, you know, I just grew up listening to that kind of music, and I had a messenger bag that said it was like this army green messenger bag that said Rush 1974 to 2112 on it. And you know, when we were working together, that was just the bag that I took to work, that I you know, put my lunch in, that I put my, you know, and I would keep my change of clothes for when I went to the gym after work in that bag. And she saw that and she's like, "Oh, are you a Rush fan?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a Rush fan." And that's how we first actually became friends. So
That's awesome.
yeah,
I do have to say
great
one thing
band.
before we go off to the next thing, which I can't wait to get to. I am a Rush fan. I was at the last show. Their first show, very first big show was Pittsburgh, after they got
Really?
signed. So, and one of their last shows on the last tour was Pittsburgh. I think they went here and they did the last one in Toronto, like right after, or
Yeah.
shortly after. I'm a Rush fan. I'm not a huge Rush fan, but I do think, to bring it all back, there's a little bit of cult feeling to some Rush fans.
That's what I was saying. I was saying, if you want to talk
If
about
you
a
have the
positive
big
cult,
bass book
maybe
and you don't play
Rush
bass,
fans.
might do it.
I mean, like, I kid, but I mean, there definitely are musicians and celebrities that have a very culty fan base around them.
Absolutely. Hey,
Yeah.
before I wanted to make sure we get here. We're running out of time. We're going to go through this celebrities that should have a cult following because they're going to be on our show soon. But one who kind of does, and Josh has a really great story about a cult, and I'm just going to let him take it from there. Josh,
for
can
it.
you jump on and tell your cult interaction story?
Well, I can try, and I have a question related to it, but I can tell the story. I think I've told on the show before, but many years ago, actually, you said that you visited Pittsburgh somewhat recently, yeah?
Yeah, last June.
Okay.
Went to a Pirates game. Pirates are playing the Phillies.
Beautiful,
Awesome.
beautiful park.
Yeah.
Excellent. And you said you went to Permanis,
Yeah.
which is good. So the original Permanis, just down the street from there is, I think, the biggest cemetery in Pittsburgh. And
Really?
it's 300 acres, in, you know, pretty much the middle of the city. It's a beautiful place. And I worked there a long time ago. I worked there during the day, but I also lived there. There's a big castle on the grounds, and they had us stay there, and we ran security at night. It's that big of a place that they wanted somebody there overnight to make sure everything was okay. So at the time, there was one other guy staying there with me, good guy named Pat. Shout out Pat. And we're hanging out
Pat.
downstairs in the common area one day, you know, watching TV, playing Nintendo, whatever it was. And there's a knock at the door, which is very out of the ordinary, especially at, I think it was 9 o'clock at night. To get into the cemetery and knock on this door at this point, you've got to know that there's a gate to walk through. You've got to walk through that gate and then find the door to this building that we reside, you know, we're living in.
Lived in.
So we go answer the door, both of us, and outside is what turns out to be, he claims, a plainclothes police officer and a psychiatrist. And they ask if they
Sound
can
like a horror movie.
come in and talk to us. And we said, sure. So they come in and they ask us a number of odd questions, but mostly relating to, have you seen anything weird around any of the mausoleums in the cemetery? We said, no, we do rounds here every night. That's why we're here, and nothing really out of place. And they said, okay. And they kind of wrapped it up and said, if you see anything, here's our card. Give us a call. And a few days later, my buddy Pat that was with me there, he comes back from his rounds and he says, hey, so I just saw something kind of odd. I was passing by one of the mausoleums up on the hill in the middle, and there was a tiki torch outside of one of the mausoleums. I walked up, and the chain that it was supposed to be locking the front of it seemed to be loose, but nothing else was out of place, just odd. And I said, oh, well, what are you going to do? That's not odd enough to call the police. Why would we do that? That's crazy. So we don't think much of it, but we start taking loops by there. And the next week, another tiki torch shows up. And so we start going by there nightly, walking around, flashlight, making sure nobody's there. And eventually, during the day, we notice that the chain is fully broken off. So we walk inside, and there is a sleeping bag, or a ton of empty orange juice containers, some mouthwash, odds and ends. Just looks like somebody homeless had shacked up in here for a bit. And so this keeps happening over the course of a little while. These weird things keep showing up around here, and we keep searching it. Every night we go up there, we're doing our rounds, we'll look around, see what we can find. A couple months later, same thing. 9:00 at night, knock at the door. We open it, same two guys. Hey, fellas, what's up? They said, so have you guys seen anything? We said, well, you're not going to believe this, but there's this tiki torch showed up, and we walked them through the story I just walked everybody through here. And they said, oh, well, that's interesting. Can we go take a look? We said, sure. So we got the extra flashlights, and all four of us took a trip up inside the cemetery. And they said, can we go inside? And we said, sure, it's broken open. I mean, please take a look. And so they go around, and they're poking around for a bit, and they grab a few things and put them into a bag. And as we're driving them back up to the front of the cemetery, they tell us, finally, that they were back because they had just found, floating in the river, the leader of Pittsburgh's largest satanic cult. And his girlfriend had told them a few weeks prior, when they had showed up the first time, that his literal small black book of people he had murdered was being held at the place he was staying, which was a mausoleum he had broken into in a local cemetery.
No.
So we had been up there for a few months at that point, searching for who they said was a murderer and leader of the biggest satanic cult in the city, by ourselves without knowing it. But that leads me to the question I had, which is, you always hear satanic cult. That's the scary one, right? How often do you come across those as opposed to a Christian-related cult of some kind?
So most of the people who are like into Satanism are into Satanism to either be like edgy, or to try to be like, or like heavy metal, or to try to give the finger
jacket
to the, or try to do something to like give the finger to what they see as
fuck the man.
F
even
the man, or in protest of the cozy relationship between the church and the government. And they're trying to say, well,
Satanists are basically admitting, we don't believe in any of this. We just want to show you how dumb you are. Like,
a lot of them are, although there is some people who, like, there is a few of them. There's like, it was more of, the occult was much more of a popular thing, I think, back in the mid-century than it is now. So most of the people that you hear about that are that say that they're Satanists are actually just like atheists who like a Satanist aesthetic. Whereas there's a lot of really culty Christian churches out there. And the people who are Satanists, who are like really into the Satanism, they kind of seem like they're in on the bit.
That's why I'm curious, because that wouldn't fit. Yeah, that wouldn't fit the definition that you've given here of a cult, then, right?
No,
Is
but
there of their own accord? So
right, but I think there are definitely there have been Satanist cults. I just can't think of any off the top of my head that really jump to mind immediately. And I'm absolutely sure that I've talked about some of these groups on our podcast.
Okay.
We've talked about so many of these groups that
well, I'm going to go back and listen.
yeah.
then.
yeah. There's like the Satanic Temple. There's a few of them. There's like the Church of Satan. The Church of Satan is one, and then the Satanic Temple is the other one. The Satanic Temple is the one where they're like really politically involved, where what they do is they like, do you know who the Westboro Baptist Church are?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
The God hates everyone people.
Just royal pieces of shit. Yeah.
Yeah, they suck.
The worst.
They actually
I would say
protested-
they're a satanic cult, if anything. They're just pretending.
So
to not be.
the Satanic Temple did a Fred Phelps, who was the guy who was like the head of the Westboro Baptist Church. The Satanic Temple did a like Satanic Temple ritual to make his mother gay in the afterlife. So they like did
I remember
some
that.
Here it
ritual.
works.
Yeah.
Here it works.
They're like, that's like the thing that they're about, is kind of being tongue in cheek, a little bit edgelordy, a little bit like that.
Real life trolls.
Yeah, but then again, there's also like, actually, you know what I'm thinking about? I'm thinking about there was it this metal band from I believe like late 80s, early 90s called Mayhem, and they behaved very much like a satanic cult.
Well, I'm glad it was a heavy metal band that did it.
Yeah,
Like, I'd be like really upset if it was like, I don't know, John Denver.
yeah.
Although that would be a cool story.
It'd be
Yeah.
a great story.
Yeah,
and
he
then
made Rocky Mountain High, and he was the member of a satanic cult.
If you push back his flop of hair, there's a
big 666 right up here. Hey, listen, we've reached a 1 hour mark, and I still have a billion questions for you. So I know I'm going
I'll
to ask
stick
you to
around.
come back at some point. Well, how about we do one or two more good questions?
Okay.
And I do appreciate you sticking around because I do. The ones I want to
this
get
has
to.
been a great interview. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been phenomenal. Thank you. Like I could tell that you do this a lot and you love doing it. So thank you for doing it with us.
Such an interesting topic, and I'm so glad that I get to talk about it for a living, basically.
I'm really glad you came here to tell us
You're good
about
at
it.
it.
Yeah, you're really just. I love tapping into your brain here.
Yeah.
So I think I really always want to get to in any conversation like this, the safe ways for someone to get themselves out or to get someone else out. And if you even want to touch on, I remember at some point that I don't know how much this is true. There are professionals that will go in and get your daughter out, or anything you want to tell people about the process of getting out of a cult once you or a loved one is in.
So, it very much depends on the situation. Like, you have to think about, are you physically
Well, how do
in
you get
danger?
yourself out?
How do you get yourself out? I've never
Safely.
done it. So I wouldn't be able to tell you from personal experience, but having talked to other people, one of the things that's most important is trying to figure out that you can is breaking down the mental barriers first, and then once those are broken down, you have the ability to remove yourself physically. So usually when somebody is getting out of a group like that, it won't be just, oh, one thing happened and that was the thing that made me decide that it was time for me to leave. It will be behind the scenes, something they've been having questions and they've been noticing discrepancies, or they've been aware of a certain situation that just something didn't sit
Too
right
much.
with them about this situation. And they just weren't happy, or they'd been having doctrinal questions or something like that behind the scenes. And this can go on for months. This can go on for years. And then something will happen, and that will be the tipping point that will make them say, okay, well, it's time for me to go now. And either that could be like if I don't leave now, then I might never, or it could be like somebody bad did this thing and that was the thing that it took to snap me out of it. Um, I can't go and speak on how best to do that and how to extricate yourself safely, because that is really changeable by specific situations. And a lot of cult groups won't necessarily even keep you in a situation where you're like walled in, like when you think of like with a compound like Waco or like uh Jonestown, where they were physically in a place, a location that they couldn't leave. Because if the mental barriers are there, then you don't need the physical barriers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I get that.
to
Yeah.
to sort of answer your question, that's what I would say. To If you're trying to get somebody else out, or there's somebody who you think has really drunk the Kool-Aid, or so to speak, on either like an ideology or a belief system that you think is actually really harmful, going up to them and confronting them about it and trying to berate them into it isn't going to work. That's not a way to do it. The way that I've heard to do it is that you have to be willing to ask them about it, like from a position of interest. Like, what does this mean to you? What do you get out of this? Does this make you happy? And really have them talk to you about it and engage with them about it from a position of like actual interest and understanding, rather than just being like, you need to leave. Because if they get, oh, this is somebody who's just coming to me to attack me, rather than this is somebody who's interested and wants to know what I actually think, then that could be a problem. They're also going to have been told probably that outsiders are hostile to them. Outsiders are dangerous.
Do not understand you.
Right. Yeah. They don't understand you. They don't want to know. And so if you come and approach somebody with kindness, and you come and approach somebody with, I want to know what it is that you actually think, let's have an honest conversation about this, then that might also be effective in turning the gears and thinking, maybe I was taught wrong about what outsiders think and how they act towards me and what they think of me.
And that's really good advice for any difficult subject. Just talk and listen.
Yeah.
Don't accuse. Don't hate. Don't tell them they're wrong. Don't cajole. Just talk. See what they're saying, and then see where your connections are as people. And
yeah, we do live in a world that is run on who can be the most divisive and who can say the thing that pisses the most people off, because that's what gets the most engagement.
Yep.
And that's the wrong way to go about it. And that might make you feel good if you're the person that says the thing that gets the most engagement or that's the most divisive, because it gets the biggest reaction, and you get to rally the troops in the biggest way. But if you're really trying to connect with people, and you're really trying to convince people to, or not convince people, but you're really trying to get somebody to change their perspective, you have to engage with them openly and honestly, and you have to be willing to, like, and this is, I guess this is an example from my life, and this isn't necessary. This is about more like, because I used to be much more on social media than I am now. I've very much taken a step back from social media, which is
I have too. Other than Instagram, to promote the show, and Reddit, which is the last social media I actually care even a little bit about.
I like Reddit. Reddit's fun.
Reddit's great at getting rid of stuff I don't want to see in general. It's hard when people want to always throw politics into a meme or whatever light humor I want.
Constantly,
but
and when that's not what you want to think about at that time, it's just like,
I want to see a funny clown picture. What are you doing to me? So I'm with you. It's a toxic world out there, and Facebook's gotten even worse with now that they suggest other people's posts and it's almost always something I could care less about, and more often than not lately, it's stuff that I actively don't want to see.
I want to see my dad post hiking pictures. That's what I want on Facebook. I don't want to see.
I miss the old days of some kid going to first day at school.
I want to see who from my high school class got engaged. Like that. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see some suggestion from some politics page that I've never like. Anyway, I'm
Yeah.
back when I was on. I used to use Twitter quite prolifically. I got off of that app. I want to say in like 21 or 22.
21. Same here.
Yeah,
I was done.
it was
Just done it. It wasn't
it was
just Elon buying it.
okay.
It was all useless. I
It-
never once got anything good out of it.
and I have real friends who I like, real life friends who I met on that app, just from talking to them about stuff. And but when I was on, the time that I spent on that show did overlap with the time that I spent on the podcast, and so I would get into disagreements with people on there. And so from time to time, I was invited to go on other people's shows um, to like debate a topic with them, and that's not really something that I do because that's not the way that I really engage with other people. But if I were to do something like that, the way that I go about doing that is I have to set up ground rules first. So I have to say something like, what would you have to be convinced of to see things the way that I see them, to see things my way? And if you're in an argument with somebody and they're like, nothing could change the way that I think about this, and I'm like, well, there's no point in me having this conversation. But in order for, and it's the same if you're trying to really talk somebody down from a belief or something like that, then you have to be willing to offer that to them. You have to be willing to say, if I see if you can prove XYZ thing to me, then
you might convince me.
Then you might be able to convince me. And you can't just say something that would, I want to say,
it has to be true.
Yeah,
when you say it, like you can't just say it to set them up. Yeah, like I'm not really gonna listen to what you say.
You have to engage people in good faith. You have to you have to ask somebody, why does this thing make you feel powerful or good or strong or fulfilled? What about it is the thing that makes you feel that way? Okay, well, how come? And ask, if you have legitimate questions about that, you have to ask them from a point of view of, this is an honest question, not from a point of view of attacking them. And that's what I think a lot of people really get wrong when they're trying to have conversations with other people about these things. Granted, if you go into this situation where, say, they're part of a group and their group is well known for various abuses, either physical or sexual abuses of other people, then I think that's a different story than if somebody believes something and you think that they've been brainwashed into thinking something that you think is wrong. Like,
there's real harm,
right? There's levels to this. Somebody thinking something that isn't true doesn't make them in a cult. I know that I have beliefs, or that I think things that probably are, if I were to look at the facts, that fact isn't true.
Let's just say it, Bigfoot.
But yeah.
I believe there's no proof. I want to believe.
I mean, Sadie was taught in school that the Loch Ness Monster is actually a plesiosaur that survived the flood of Noah, and scientists are covering up the existence of the Loch Ness Monster because that would prove evolution. I mean, that would disprove evolution. It would prove creationism. She was taught that in school.
That wasn't thought all the way through, was it? Like, I'm just thinking, there's a billion holes I could poke into that one. First off, we'd have all of the aquatic dinosaurs. But anyway,
what they're saying is that humans and dinosaurs were alive at the same time, and scientists don't want you to know that humans and dinosaurs were alive at the same time because they want you to think it was millions and billions of years ago, when in reality we were riding dinosaurs, and when the flood of Noah happened, the dinosaurs died out except for the plesiosaur, which is the Loch Ness Monster, which survived. And because it's from an era before the firmament was broken down, people lived a lot longer, and so that's why the plesiosaur has been able to survive thousands of years on Earth when other organisms that are less pure, because they're further from the time of creation happening, would have shorter lifespans.
What about crocodiles? Anyway,
Yeah.
that's
Maybe
my
the
perfect
Flintstones
dinosaur.
confused them.
And the
Checkmate.
Flintstones. Jeez, that was just propaganda by modern science to make
To
it
get their
sound
grants,
silly.
they got to get those grants to keep doing
Hey.
their research.
I have one more question for you that is not cult related, sort of.
Go for it.
But we're gonna, Josh, can you go through our quick what we got going on thing, and then we'll get to it. I want to tease people. It's going to be the best question of the night.
Oh, okay. I'm excited.
Josh, you want
Yeah,
to
sure.
run through this quick?
Yeah. A week from today, we have
Douglas Vermeeren, director, actor, producer. Doug was going to be on our show last year, and he's so busy. We're lucky to have him this year. He's going to have a lot of great. He's been in a billion things. Look him up on IMDb, and he also has a recent project, Science Getting Rich Quick movie, based on the book that was apparently I didn't get it yet, but it's a great big seller.
and then up on March 13th.
Rob Lawless. I believe he's also in the Philly area. Rob has a mission to make 10,000 friends across the world. I believe he's halfway through around now, and he actually meets people. He talks to them. He's not just writing up a blog post about it. We're going to meet him, talk to him about his journey, how all of this has changed his life. I've heard nothing but great stuff about it. I've seen his posts a lot. We're going to have him on the show. It's going to be amazing.
10,000 friends?
Yeah,
I have
actual people he meets and hangs out with
I have
for at least an hour. 5
or 6 friends.
I'm the older you get, the less you have. So I'm gonna get when he's in his 70s. How many do you still have?
I'll tell you, I'm getting married next year, and I'm putting together like the guest list, and I'm just like, I don't know that many people. How did this
Invite
list get
Rob
up to-
and see what he can bring with him.
No, I
mean, you're-
can't do that, dude. It's so much money, and they charge you like per guest.
They
on
do,
a-
but if you have a higher gift amount than you have in food amount, you can make it work. It's like the returning the bottles to Jersey thing.
I don't know how he would if that guy gets married. How is he going to invite everyone? How is he going to
can't.
do it?
It's gonna be a stadium tour
I mean, imagine the catering. The catering bill is going to be
alone.
immense.
The porta potty bill. The porta potty
Enormous.
bill alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He'll have to get
who do we
married
have?
at the I guess if he's in Philly, the Wells Fargo Center.
It'd have to be that big. Yeah. I hope he.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I'm going to ask that question, and I'll put
Yeah.
your name on it too. Hey, if you get married, are you inviting all these people? Or are you?
I mean,
married?
if he's that friendly, he's probably already married. Who could resist? a
I
guy
honestly
who's
don't
that
know.
kind?
I've done some research, and I don't have that info. I'm gonna. But either way, your question's getting asked.
All right.
Whatever. Next, Josh. Sorry.
March 20th.
Kamal Ahmed. You know Kamal if you're anywhere near my age anyway. One of the Jerky Boys, who's now on doing a much bigger, interesting thing. Is Crash the System is a show he's currently working on, writing and producing his own show. He's done a couple other things, including Laugh Killer Laugh. And we get to talk with him about his life before and after the Jerky Boys. We're not going to sit and just talk about Jerky Boy stuff. You're going to get to know Kamal. And what do we have after that? Oh,
Well, we just wanted to give a quick shout out as well to friend of the show,
Eric Violette. Go to violette.com. If you're a subscriber on his Patreon, you can download the album that he has just released. You can get it, I think it comes out on March 6th, but you can get it now. Eric is an amazing musician who specializes in soundscapes. This is just some amazing work. He spent years doing this album. I've listened to a lot of it. It is great. Give him a shot. And if you don't recognize the name Eric Violette, if you remember the freecreditreport.com commercials, he was the lead singer in that band.
No.
Yeah, he doesn't sound like that at all. He has a very thick French accent. It was all some other beat. Yeah. But he's that
great
guy.
dude.
We had him on the show, and absolutely one of our best guests of all time. He's an incredible person.
A lot of fun.
So yeah, I like interesting people. Like when I found out like he would talk to me, I'm like, you're coming on the show. He's incredible guest and an amazing human being on top of it all. He's just somebody like if you watch that interview, you'll want to hang out with Eric. He's a positive ray of light. And that there's no sarcasm in that sense at all, I swear.
No.
Speaking of positive ray of lights, the last question. You are a musician on the side, if you don't mind talking about it. And on your website, you talked about doing backing vocals, performing with a very famous musician, Ben Folds. I was just curious if you could tell us how you got there and what that was like in your life.
Oh man, that must
That's
that
awesome.
was like 10 years ago. So I always did music. I started doing piano lessons when I was like 6. And when I was in like high school, I joined choir, and I also started playing guitar. So, and so that was just something that I got into. And then when I went to college on a voice scholarship, on a singing scholarship.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So when I said your voice is good, you're like, I know.
So when I was in college, I believe my senior year, the vocal jazz group that I was in was the person who was Ben Folds was on tour, and he was trying to and they were trying to get backing vocalists to sing, because he was doing a tour where he was singing with orchestras. And this was, I believe, in like 2014. And so they would hire the guy who was one of the people who was getting the musicians to come to like hiring the singers was an alumni from my university. And so that's how I ended up with that gig. I think he came to our director of choral activities and was like, need singers for this. And that's how I ended up getting to do that. But I did get to sing with Ben Folds like 10 years ago. And that was a lot of fun. It was a great gig. Yeah.
It's got to be a great gig. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Very nice dude.
Did you get to practice and hang out first, or was it like you practiced separate and you kind of came out on stage?
I mean, if you're doing that sort of thing, like we had rehearsals, and we had to basically like learn all the music beforehand. And then there's like you go there and you do like a rehearsal. You do like rehearsals with it, and then you actually do it, and then there's the show. So it's not like it's not like I'm best friends with Ben Folds.
No.
I have him on LinkedIn or anything. But
you did a job.
Yeah, I did a job. And I think I did a good job. So
that's awesome. First off, I love. Let me wrap this up by saying, first off, thank you for being on the show. Incredible guest, incredible
knowledge. Thanks for having me, man.
I'd love to have you back at some point, because we have a billion.
I will come back. Maybe I'll get Sadie to come on the show. You'd love to talk to her. She's so smart. She'll tell you all sorts of things. Like, she'll tell you about what it was like going to Colt College, because she went to Colt College.
We'll call the episode that.
Yeah,
that's.
I didn't know that she's got to come on the show. Yeah.
Yeah, please, love to. I think it's an important topic, because we like to talk about relationships here, and not just the romantic kinds. And cults impact your life, obviously, in every way possible. And if you know somebody in a cult, it impacts your life too. So I like to bring it up. Again, we don't want to concentrate on it. That's your job. And can you throw up the URL again, Josh? Is that way people know how to get in touch with you? All right. There we go. Also, if you follow our show on Instagram, I am following you. Sorry, my brain's falling apart doing the wrap up. I just love what I wanted to get at was I really love your passion for the things you love and how you get to take it to the next level. You have taken your music to play with a name everybody knows. You have, and by the way, on your website, there's some great songs to listen to, and we did listen to them. So
thank you.
At least I did. I don't know if Josh.
I haven't put out new music in years. I record music from time to time, but a lot of times I record stuff and I just like I don't do anything with it. Either that or I'll record something and I just won't like the way that it sounds enough to the point where I won't put it out. Yeah. Or just like I I like performing live more than I like recording, and so I'll play a lot of open mics in the Philly area. But rather than like really trying to track and release music, because that just it isn't as much fun for me as it is just playing for an audience.
I totally get that. I absolutely get that. The whenever you're creating a song or music, like you want to get everything right, and then there's one thing you want to get to, like I'll do that, but I'm not in the headspace to fix that one thing, or to add the thing I wanted or remove, and then like you just put it off, and then like it's good enough, and it's not good enough, and you don't get back to it.
Or the technology these days with recording is so good that it can always be better. That everything that you do, oh man, I could do another take, and what are you going to do? Just do another take, and then you just one more time, and you
I
just
hear the
never
slide
get it
on the strings too much. I need to get that out of there the next time, and
No, exactly. It's like, oh, is that a buzz on the front? Whereas if I'm playing live, you do it once, and
that stuff helps make a live performance.
And I've always felt that whenever I was listening to music as a kid, my favorite album by all my favorite artists was always the live one. And not just because they would always play like the best songs, like they would always play the most famous songs live, but also because I always thought the live albums had so much more energy. Like I was thinking about this, I was raised on like a lot of the folk music from the 60s and the 70s, and I think one of my favorite albums ever that I was always listening to, or that my dad always had on, was the Central Park concert from Simon and Garfunkel, and that album is just so good, and I listen to it all the time. But they could only do that once. They couldn't do it in the studio over and over and over again. They could practice it a bunch of times, but once you go out there, that's the one that everyone hears, and that's the one they're filming.
Hey, Chuck Berry's only #1 hit is a live recording.
Oh, really?
My Ding-a-Ling.
Ugh. Not his best song.
It's his only #1 song.
That's just
It's amazing, but it's a live recording, and I don't know. You brought up the trivia thing in my brain.
He made Maybelline. He made Johnny Be Good, and
so many other. But I love the lyrics of My Ding-a-Ling. It's a throwaway novelty song.
You also couldn't have Ding-a-Ling in a studio. Like that's not a studio song. That has to be. Yeah. You have to have that audience reaction to make that song what it is.
Otherwise it's a bad Dr. Demento song you hear once a year.
Whatever happened to novelty songs?
I don't know. I'm still trying to release them with AI music, and people just don't care. Speaking of,
all right.
I grew up. In fact, when I met my wife, within 3 weeks, she had mentioned that she too had listened to Dr. Demento as a kid, and I knew she was the one.
That's where we got Weird Al.
Yeah, I'm kind of Weird Al adjacent with some stuff I've done. I sold a Weird Al autobiography on the Pawn Stars TV show, and then he played that clip at the beginning of his big tour a couple years ago.
No way.
I was
awesome.
on the screen at Weird Al concerts.
I love Weird Al. When I was a kid, I was not into whatever the most popular music was. There's a lot of songs where I heard the Weird Al version of the song before I heard the actual version. Because in the 80s, my dad was in medical school and my mom was in grad school, and so they didn't. That the 80s was just like a pop culture hole for them, and so I was like, well, yeah. And so like I would listen to Weird Al and I'm like, what is this song based off of? And then I would be like, oh, it's Madonna. But my Madonna albums were never on when I was growing up. So I heard Weird Al's Like a Surgeon before I heard Like a Virgin by Madonna.
Wow. Madonna's first album put me through puberty. Like that. Like my friend and I would just stare at the album cover. I want a girl like that. Like that's
very talented, great artist.
I love a large chunk of her career. In the early years, I can't stand her voice until she learned how to sing. I like the music, I like the look, but I to this day I can't listen to her voice. And then when she got really good, and then now I don't know anything about what she's doing now. So
yeah,
there was a chunk where I really loved her deep, resonant voice when she showed it off. In the early albums, she was very high pitched. She's not doing anything vocally correct, and it shows.
So you're not a fan of like Material Girl? You're not a fan of like a Virgin? You're not a fan of?
I like them for nostalgic reasons, not because they're good songs. writer. I can't remember the one song, but I really took an interest in who she was as an artist. Anyway, we're way off topic.
Yeah.
We're at the end of the show. And I did want to announce a special show we have Saturday before we forget. I don't know if we have the graphic up for it. There it is anyway. We're interviewing Uwe Boll on Saturday about his new movie, The Dark Knight. Yes, The Dark Knight. He's going to keep that name if I have anything to say about it, which is the 4th movie in the Rampage series. So tune in for a special show. It's will take place at noon Eastern Standard Time here in the States. He's calling us from Germany. So it's a special Saturday show. We do whatever Uwe wants. So we're doing it on Saturday. So tune in for that. And I think we have one more booking, but it's going to be a surprise that we'll throw it out at the Uwe show when we have everything nailed down. And that's it. I want to thank you, Gavi, for showing up on our show and giving us so much. Loved having you. You're an absolute delight to talk with. Love to call you a friend of the show, and would love to have you and your co-host back.
Hell yeah.
This was really great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, literally anytime, just whenever you want.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for your knowledge, for your time, for everything. Let's get out of here, Josh.
Yep, have a good night.
Oh my goodness, that is quite a question.
Oh, you are so funny. That is so true. You're like the only person that's ever asked me that question.
I'm really glad that you noticed that you pointed that out.
So I just want to give you a shout out and say it's appreciated.
It's been so fun chatting with you guys. I didn't realize how late it got.
I'll always talk to you guys.
Thanks very much. And again, you guys are super well prepared. You got your act together. I hope you continue to get more viewers. You deserve them.
You guys, you are the first podcast to bring this up, and I'm impressed. I'm really impressed.
Thank you. Bye.